Okay, so in today's lesson we're going to be learning about a way that we can represent a sequence. We talked about sequence back a couple chapters ago, but we're going to be talking about a recursive formula for a sequence. There's a specific way that we're going to write this, as is described in this box here, but an easy way to illustrate this, we're not going to be doing these examples on the front page, by the way, so I'm just going to use this space. The first thing we always start out with a recursive formula is this funky bracket. Okay, that's what we'll refer to it as. Now, within this funky bracket, there's going to be two rows. The first row, so what we're talking about here in part A, indicates the first term or first few terms of the sequence. So if we want to indicate the first term, we would say, let's use S sub 1 for the first term in the sequence equals some number. Okay, so that represents the first term in the sequence. Like here, even though I scribbled it out, you can see that the first term in the sequence was referring to was going to be 113. Now the bottom row tells us how we're going to find the next terms in the sequence. So the next term in sequence S would be S sub n minus 1 plus some number. And we end it with this little phrase. So let's talk about this first. We have S sub n equals S sub n minus 1 plus some number. Again, that represents how we're going to figure out the next term in the sequence. We'll look at some examples that'll make more sense of this in a second. But with this phrase for integers, n is greater than or equal to 2, n refers to your term number. We already know the first term. We already know that the first term is going to be some number here. And so we're going to use this particular sequence here, this method to find the next term in the sequence for the second term on. So the way that we phrase that is we're going to say for integers where the n is greater than or equal to 2, again, that phrase for integers n is greater than or equal to 2 refers to the fact that we're going to be using that formula for the second term on. So let's look at some examples here. Here they give us the sequence A is equal to 10,000, 9,600, 9,200, and so on of dollar amounts left on a car loan if $400 is repaid each month. Write a recursive definition for the sequence A sub n. So again, we start out with our funky bracket. A sub 1 represents the first term in sequence A, we know is going to be 10,000. Now to figure out the next term in the sequence, we're going to take the previous term. So again, A sub n minus 1 always refers to the previous term. If you want to make note of that, that's what that's referring to. But it's going to be the previous term, and we're paying off $400 each month, so it's going to be minus 400. I'm going to abbreviate this for integers where n is greater than or equal to 2. Because that means from the second term on, we're going to use that formula. Another way that you could write it is you could say for integers where n is greater than 1. Notice the difference there, and because our integers don't include decimals, so the next integer after 1 would be your second term. Personally, I like using what I put down first, but sometimes your book will have the other way. They both mean the same thing. Okay, so why don't you guys give this a shot, see if you can figure out the recursive formula for this sequence. So pause the video and hit play when you're ready to check your answer. Okay, so what you should have done is your first term is 850. What you should have recognized here is that we're subtracting 75 each time. Okay, so we're subtracting 75 each time to get to the next term in the sequence. So that's what we're going to say. So to find the next term in the sequence, you're going to use the previous term. I guess technically this was sequence B is what they're referring to, so let's just do that. So we're going to take the previous term, b sub n minus 1, minus 75, and we would say for integers, n is greater than or equal to 2. Now you might say, well, why are we using b sub n minus 1 to refer to the previous term? Why don't you just write down 850? Well, again, we can use this sequence, or we could use this recursive formula to come up with a sequence. If I didn't know what the sequence was now, I could say, well, I know my first term is going to be 850. And again, b sub n minus 1 represents the previous term. So to find the next term in the sequence, I would take the previous term, which is 850, minus 75, which gives me 775. Now to find the next term in the sequence, I'm not going to use 850. I'm going to use the previous term, which is 775, minus 75, which gives me 700. To find the next term in the sequence, I would take the previous term, which is now 700, minus 75, which would be 625, and so on. So that's how the recursive formula gets used. Let's apply this to a story problem now. The NCAA women's basketball tournament originally consists of 64 teams, which are paired in a single elimination contest. At the end of each round of play, the number of teams proceeding to the next round is half the previous number. The sequence 64, 32, 16, 8, 4, and 2 gives the number of teams in the tournament at the beginning of round n. Okay, so it says use words to write a recursive definition of this sequence. So we're going to actually skip that. We're just going to skip to part B. Well, let's use part A. Part A just says to write this as in words, we could just say something along the lines that we could describe what the first term is going to be. The first term is 64, and each of the following terms is found by multiplying by 1/2 or dividing the previous term by 2, either way. But we're going to describe this using a recursive formula. That's what you need to know mostly for the quiz and for a test. So again, this is basketball tournaments. We can use T for tournament. So the first term of this tournament would be 64 teams. To find the next term in the sequence, we would take the previous term and divide by 2. For integers where n is greater than or equal to 2. Now, there's another way that you could have written this. You could have also said, instead of saying t sub n minus 1 divided by 2 like this, you could have also written this as t sub n minus 1 divided by 2. That would have been fine to use as well. Okay, so why don't you try this last one and hit play when you're ready to, so pause the video and hit play when you're ready to check your answer. Okay, so we should have gotten for your recursive formula here is that the first term in the sequence is 324. And to find the next term in the sequence, what you're doing here is, what you should have noticed is you're dividing by 3 each time. So you would take the previous term, and let's just write it like this for this one, and divide by 3. For integers where n is greater than or equal to 2. So there you go. So hopefully you have a decent understanding now of a recursive formula, and good luck on your assignment.